The slider window that was in this airplane on the other airframe had these bent up pieces of aluminum. They went on the ends of the piece of plexiglass and then slid into the pocket there, that weather strip pocket. And then they had these tabs here that you could pull on to move the window in and out. And then those stiffened the windows up. They were glued on with some RTV, some clear silicone, which actually held up a lot better than I thought it would, but there's a pretty good sized area in there for it to be in. And then between the two pieces they have these strips with this fuzzy stuff on it for weather stripping, I guess. But that channel on the other airframe, the window channel, was a lot wider than this channel is. So the plexiglass, the glass, the plastic with these things on there fit in pretty good, pretty tight, and slid back and forth. But with this channel that I got from Stoddard's in Anchorage when I got the airframe, is the stuff that they sell for the Supercub. It's a lot narrower channel, and so this stuff didn't really fit on there very well, on the windows very well. And then the other thing is the back window with that Kydex on there. It's kind of comes out around that window post there quite a ways, and so if I put this on there, it wouldn't have closed, the window wouldn't have closed all the way, and you wouldn't have been able to get fingers in there to open that window up to make it slide. Well, a lot of the Cubs and airplanes with slider windows that I've been around, in fact the one I flew for a long time, just had a piece of plexiglass glued onto the window frame, onto the slider portion of it, just a square like this. I got some 3/4 inch plexiglass. I cut off a strip maybe 3/4 of an inch wide or so, and that looks like that'll work. Just cement it onto the plexiglass. Well, I cut up a bunch of scrap pieces of the plastic plexiglass from the windows, and I used the applicator there, practicing a little bit to put it on, and it took some practicing to get it. Wasn't all that impressed with what I was doing. No matter what I did, you could see little bubbles or something in there, places where it either didn't quite get all the way through, or when it did, there were little spots where there were bubbles sticking up in it. This one here, I tried moving it around a little bit, pushing down on the piece and moving it a little bit to get it to kind of seat in there like you would glue or something, and that didn't really work. That piece popped off of there after it set for a while. And it does take a while for this stuff to set up, but I don't know whether you can see those bubbles in there or not on those pieces. Some of these are better than others. And like this one here was pretty good. But then that stuff comes out of that hypodermic syringe, or that hypodermic needle on this little applicator. A lot of it comes out, so it drips all over places, and you get spots in here. I was worried about getting discoloration or melted spots in the plexiglass from that stuff dripping out and running out all over, but it's not too bad. But I still plagued with these little spots in here, so I did this a couple different ways. I did it with just peeling the paper off and just doing it bare, and then I took some pieces out and washed them off with soap and water, and tried them that way to clean any oil or anything off of here, any residue off of this plexiglass that may have been on it, maybe stop that stuff from making a film all the way through there. That didn't seem to make any difference, so I kind of give up on that. What I may do when I get to the final product, or I guess what I'm going to do practicing a little bit, is I'll take and wash this stuff down with soap and water real good again, and then maybe take a little alcohol and wash it with alcohol. You're not supposed to use any, what they call that, aromatics or anything, but anything like acetone or lacquer thinner or anything like that on it, because that'll eat the plastic or etch into it. I think paint thinner will be alright on it, because they use naphtha or something like that to wash this stuff down with. They recommend that to wash it with too, so I think paint thinner would be okay. So the next thing I did is I took my piece of 3/4 inch stock, the sheet that I got, I took it and marked off an inch wide piece, and then took it down to the bandsaw and cut it off. One of the videos that I saw from TAP, they said to use a router to make a clean edge on these. So I set up my router on a router table with a straight cutting bit and tried to make a straight edge on that and make a nice clean to clean that up, and it didn't work very well at all. It's pretty rough. It's almost as rough as the bandsaw. Actually, this is the bandsaw marks on this side. It was rougher than the bandsaw on this side. But I wanted a little shape to this handle. You can see you got a little cove in there. I wanted a little shape to that handle for fingers and stuff in there, not just a square block. So I did take and put another bit in the router, and I run through there, and it still leaves a lot of chatter marks and stuff. It's not a very clean cut, but it cleans up real well with a half-round bastard file and then some sandpaper. I'm going to take this down now and try to hit that with a flame off a propane torch. They say in the videos that you need a MAP gas torch to get it to flame polish, but I've done it before with just a propane torch. So this is what it looks like put on, and it glued on there real nice. It's just a little small piece, but that's kind of what I want to do with the windows. It's just a small piece like that, so it's completely unobtrusive. Well, I took this piece down there to the shop where I had my propane torch, and I flame broiled it, flame polished it. This is the portion here. I didn't flame polish this. This was just sanded down and filed down with the half-round bastard file, and then sanded a little bit with some 220, and then just touched on a little bit with some 400. And you can see it's a little bit cloudy and milky. But down here where I hit it with the flame, that polished up pretty good. You can actually see through that, and the distortion on that is not from this side, it's from this side. Now, this side was just raw. This was from, I went with the straight cut-off bit, and then what I did with the cove bit, I didn't sand this or anything else like that. I just went ahead and took the torch, it was just a flame, and went over it, and it shines it up. I didn't do this end here. It shines it up, but it's still got all of the serrations in there, the verticals in there that are pretty deep. It does catch on fire, it flames a little bit when you heat it and hold it in there very long. It also distorted a little bit. This one is bent just a little bit now from the heat. It was bent worse than that till it cooled off, and I did stick it in a hardy hole on the vise and held it straight. But anyway, the propane torch is hot enough there, and that smoothed that up. It's really nice through here where that was polished up good. I went and marked off another piece and cut it off on the bandsaw. I marked this one 1.25 inches, and I was going to bring it back up here and try it on the router again, and I decided that that thing didn't work very good the first time. It wouldn't work any better this time, so I just put it on the belt sander, and the belt sander takes all the saw marks out, and I got that smoothed out pretty much straight with the belt sander. Good enough for who it's for. I've got my coving bit set up here in the router table, and I just have to remember to make sure and keep the same side down. I'm going to do this, run it through one way, and then run it through the other way. What I don't want to do is run it through one way and flip it over and do it through the other way. Well, I've got a push stick here to use to push it through there. So far so good. Now I'll have to raise that up a little bit and just keep going until I get it the right dimension. I think I'll go find me some earplugs too. Well, I got a profile routed out, so I'll take the half round file now and clean this edge up here. Actually, I think I'll go ahead and take this down to the bandsaw and cut it off 3.5 inches or so, and then round this over and profile it, and then I'll take the half round file and the files and the sandpaper and stuff and smooth it up. I cut that acrylic bar up into 4 chunks, about 3 inches, 3.5 inches long each, and then sat down and took the half round file and cleaned them up, all the marks and stuff, or most of the marks on there from the routing, and then took some 220 grit sandpaper and went over it, and then some 400 grit sandpaper, and that polished them up pretty smooth. Well, I'm going to go ahead and flame polish them now. Yeah, that polished up pretty good. Use a little bit more on that end. There it goes. I'm going to take at least one of these, one that's got the worst gouge in it. I'm going to go ahead and glue it onto one of those plastic pieces and try it out on that. I'm going to strip that paper off. I think I'll take those down, or take those out and wash them down real good with some soap and water before I do it, and let them dry out real good, and then try it that way. Well, the flame polishing works pretty good, but you got to take the paper off. The paper wants to burn and char, and then it chars on the plexiglass itself, on the plastic itself. Well, I was trying to do it with the paper on it so I didn't scratch up the finished surfaces on there, but that didn't work very well. It caused some problems. I got a little bit of, see how hot that still is, it's cooled off enough. You got a little bit of charring and stuff around the edges on this one piece right here, but it worked really good. It cleared up really nice. Even the little divots and stuff that were in there from the router bit chunking into it polished out and look a lot better. These are the finished pieces, and they look pretty darn good. The ones that I hope are the finished pieces for the window. Anyway, I washed those all down with soap and water, and then I washed them again with some denatured alcohol, and I let that sit now enough for that to flash off, so those things should be good and dry. Yeah, that little deal was a failure. I've got a big bubble in the middle of that. Must not be quite flat. I got way too much solvent on there because I was trying to force it in there to get that bubble out. Except for that one bubble in there, that big bubble in the middle, I don't see the bubbling in there that was in there before. Got to push down on it. Yeah, I screwed that up pretty bad. I think this distorted from the heat. Oh well, I'll let them sit up overnight. This one looks like crap. It's all crinkly in there. This one I didn't disturb. So I pushed down on this one to try to force the bubble out, and when I let off on it, it popped up off of the plastic, and it made a mess. But this one is not so bad. I'll let that one sit and let it all cure and see how it looks after it's set up for 24 hours. I know better than to push down on them now anyway. I let these sit overnight, and this one here that I'd screwed up, it doesn't look so bad. It's still ugly in there, in that glue joint, but it doesn't look near as bad as it did. But all that glue or solvent run out here, and it messed up the plastic around the handle there. And it's on there good and tight. This one here is better. It still has that bubble in it where the stuff didn't, the solvent didn't get all the way underneath it. Like what happens here, you can feel it on these pieces here. This one's not, yeah, a little bit here on the ends and stuff where those got heated up. It misshapes that bottom, so there's kind of a depression in the middle of this here, and it's higher on around the outside edges. If you look at it kind of at an angle, you can kind of see how it's higher on these outside edges. It must be from the heat forming, or the heat polishing, flame broiling. Anyway, I've got my front slider window sitting here on a piece of newspaper. I took the protective paper off of it. I didn't really want to do that for two reasons. One, it keeps the window from getting all scratched up while it's we're working on everything, and two, I had the orientation for the window marked on the paper. I took the inside piece off first because I had the orientation marked on the outside piece, and then I marked with a Sharpie up here on the top the orientation for this. Then I took the outside piece off, and again I marked the orientation for it on the outside. I took it down to the bathtub and washed it down with soap and water, and then brought it up here, set it down on this piece of newspaper, and washed it off with alcohol. And I've got my handle here, washed it off with alcohol again. I'll let that sit, let the alcohol evaporate off, make sure everything's dry, and then I'll try gluing that thing on there. I'm going to take this rule here I'm going to set it on the plexiglass there just like that, and then that'll give me setback from the front edge, and I can also measure up, say 2 inches from the bottom or 3 inches from the bottom, and that way I can get my handle set there in a good spot, in the spot where I want it. Well, I've got that set on there. I use the rule to space it off the front edge here and keep it nice and parallel with the front edge of the glass, and run it up 2.5 inches, and then put the solvent on there, the glue on there, and it went in pretty good, except the applicator dripped back near the cap of it down onto the newspaper here, and it started running, so I moved this thing back off of where that solvent is on there so it doesn't get into that plexiglass, into the main sheet. But otherwise it went in there pretty good. I've got a bubble in the center of that, as I expected. I had to force myself to quit, but I quit before I put too much stuff in there like I did on that practice piece. That's kind of why I did the practice piece. So anyway, it looks pretty good. We'll let that set up on there now and see how it goes, see how it looks, and see how bad I screwed this one up before I tried doing it on the back piece. Well, I'm going to deem this one a success. It's glued on there pretty good. It's still got a bubble inside there where the solvent didn't get all the way in. But I did a better job on that than my practice pieces. And practice makes perfect. Oh, you can see it here. But it came out pretty good. I like this 210 plastic cleaner and polish. When I started, the gold standard was Meguiar's, and everybody used it, but it's kind of expensive, and so when I got out to where I was commercially using it every day, I just used Pledge, and that worked okay. But the thing I found out about Pledge was it builds up, and when you fly in the rain it gets milky. When I was using Pledge, I would regularly wash the windows down with just plain soap and water and a soft cloth. That would bring out all the scratches then. That takes all the Pledge off, and then you can see all the scratches in the windows, so you got to Pledge it back over again. But like you say, the Pledge gets cloudy in the rain, and I found that this stuff, a lot of the other stuff does too. There's all kinds of different plastic cleaners and polish, but this stuff doesn't build up so bad and doesn't get cloudy when it gets wet. You have enough problems with visibilities and stuff in the rain as it is without your windshield. I mean, you got foggy windows and fog outside and rain on the windows and all kinds of other stuff. Enough problems without having a plastic cleaner that you use and get foggy on you. Well, after cleaning that window up, polishing it up with some polish and stuff, I went ahead and stuck it over here in the window where it goes. Now, it doesn't gain its full strength until for 24 hours, so it won't be till tomorrow, but I put it in there anyway. It's out of the way there. It slides too easy right now, but when I get that other piece in there, they'll be pushing against each other, sliding against each other, so that'll take up more room. Well, that looks pretty nice. I took the rear window, took the paper off of it, marked the inside of it there up in the top. That's going to disappear in the weather stripping up there, but I marked it what side was front and back. I'd put this in the frame there so I could see where I wanted to put this handle, and I measured it out. I made a mark on the paper, and then I measured it back, and it's at least 2.5 inches from this edge back this way is where that handle's going to be. So anyway, I took all the paper off of that, took it down and washed it with some soap and water and rinsed it off. And brought it up here and dried it back off again, and then I washed it down with some alcohol, both the window panel itself and my handle. I guess I might as well glue it on there too. Alright, this handle's glued on. Well, at least it's sitting on there with the glue in there, and it did exactly what I expected it was going to do, just like the other one did. It's got a big bubble in the middle where that handle was dished, and the stuff didn't go in there with the capillary action. But well, I think it's going to be fine. Well, there's my slider windows in. See, that slides a lot harder now with both of those in there. It was pretty loose with just the one in. That's going to loosen up as it gets used more. But those handles work pretty darn good. They look pretty good too. There we go. Now, just as I thought, back one's got that little blister in it, or a little bubble in it. But it's on there pretty good. And those, yeah, okay. I suppose I could probably take the paper off of those D windows, I guess, but the longer they're on there, the more they're protected from getting scratched up. So